So now we've heard those details, but let's take the discussion even further. There's debate over whether these sanctions could be too weak or perhaps too strong, and most importantly, what their effects will be, especially if we take Mahmoud Ahmadinejad's words into account when he says that these sanctions will stop all negotiations over Iran's nuclear program. So could that bring us perhaps to the brink of war? Here to discuss it with me is George Lopez, a senior fellow, United States Institute of Peace, and Jamal Abdi, the policy director for the National Iranian American Council. Thank you so much for being here, gentlemen. So now, like I said, Iran is standing strong on their stance. They're saying that all negotiations are off the table if these sanctions are passed. Now the sanctions are passed. If negotiations are off, what's the next step? Is it war? Is it some kind of a violent action?
That's the critical question. Are negotiations off? And I think the concern that a lot of people have regarding the sanctions and the way that they were passed today is whether or not the Obama administration is still committed to diplomacy. And
what does it matter if the Obama administration says they're committed to diplomacy? Because it looks like they kind of gave up on diplomacy if they were pushing so hard for sanctions. And if Iran says no, if diplomacy is a two-way street.
Yeah, I don't think that's the case at all. I mean, this is a fairly unique sanctions resolution. You see it has a section on engagement and what the Iranians and other friendly states need to do to get back to the table in the spirit of the October Geneva discussion, which the Iranians walked away from. This is a pretty unprecedented structure in a resolution because not only does it include the steps for engagement, but as one of the annexes, it includes the 2008 statement by the European Union for the structure of the incentives. What we know historically, when states choose to denuclearize, the first step is sanctions, which makes them angry, which ups the ante on engagement, and then there needs to be a structure for engagement. In the absence of direct dialogue with the Americans and with many of the members of the P5, what the Council has done is it laid out the map for Iran. And in laying out the map, it says at the end of the process, here's the incentives, here's the economic engagement package. I don't know how the sanctions or the Council could be clearer.
Is that incentive enough? Because sanctions, if they do, in fact, only, inflict rage upon the population who the sanctions are being put on, why would they want to play ball then after that?
Well, here's the problem. There was the October deal that George says Iran walked away from, but there was also a more recent deal to try to salvage what was struck in October, and that was brokered by Brazil and Turkey. And now it looks like that deal has been rejected by the Obama administration.
Why do you think that deal has been rejected?
Two reasons.
What changed since last year?
Well, a couple of things have changed. The first is that the amount of 3% uranium you enriched in October is different than what you have at the end of May. In fact, the estimates are a little bit more than double. What the Iranians agreed to was depositing exactly the amount from October with no statement at all about what happens to the rest. The agreement was also paralleled by a statement by administration officials in Tehran that they now can enrich until the 20% level and declare the right to do that. So it's sort of giving with one hand and taking away with the other.
But is that deal better than nothing? At least, there
are some deals that are worse than nothing.
That at least shows that Iran is trying to compromise or negotiate in their own way.
Well, the deal was an opening for negotiations. The deal was an opening for diplomacy. And with these sanctions that passed, now we have moved away from that. It's not clear how we're going to get back to a point where we can start to engage with Iran again.
Let me give you two places where that point can be. If the deal of a couple of weeks ago with Turkey, Brazil, and Iran mattered, then Turkey and Brazil would have been able to find a way to lean on the Iranians to at least present a schedule to the Security Council for the delivery of the rest of the uranium.
But Turkey and Brazil did not vote a yes on these sanctions that were approved
That's fine.
Today.
They have a right.
They still on the other side, they're not willing to play ball.
No. What they're willing to do, and what they wanted to do, is broker an agreement in the spirit of the UN's attempt to bring this crisis to an end. And their attempt could have been furthered if the Iranians met them halfway and delivered more uranium. Put it a different way. If the Iranians were serious about that agreement taking hold and replacing the sanctions, then why today would you declare an end to all negotiations? Why wouldn't you if you will, up the ante on the Security Council and say, with our partners, Brazil and Turkey, we now propose the following alternative to sanctions?
Well, Jamil, what's your take on that? Do you think that they were serious about this deal with Turkey and Brazil?
You know, in October, the deal was scuttled because of the internal paralysis within Iran. There was a political crisis, and you had elements within Iran's government that wanted to accept the deal. You had Ahmadinejad who wanted to accept the deal, and it was scuttled because his opponents and, you know, the supreme leader did not end up approving it. Now you have a position where Iran has achieved a degree of stability, and they did offer this deal. And the fact that they're not coming back to the table and trying to include even more compromises, that's something that has to be done with the U.S., with the Vienna group. And by passing sanctions, you're not allowing that to happen.
Well,
There's an
let's
interesting
look at
precedent
this
here.
point first, too, is are sanctions even going to work? Are they going to hinder Iran's plans for their nuclear program at all? Are they only going to hurt the population? When do sanctions ever work?
Well, sanctions have worked historically, and I think a good parallel is the Libyan situation. You could, at this moment, suggest, if you were the Iranians, Brazilians, and Turks, that while the implementation phase of the next 30 days goes forward on sanctions, we're going to take the following steps. When the United States and Britain reached an agreement with Libya about denuclearizing their program, heavy sanctions were in place.
But what
the
about
UN
North
decided,
Korea? What about sanctions on North Korea? Those clearly haven't worked. What do we
No,
say?
no. I don't think you can say they haven't worked. They've dramatically
They work. The
constrained.
population there is, I'm sorry, starving. North Korea, we have no idea what they're up to all the time. For all we know, their nuclear program is doing just fine.
No, the nuclear program has had a number of interdictions which really set it back dramatically. One of the reasons in this Iranian sanctions resolution, there's a panel of experts to deal with illicit financing, missile technology, and the like, is because the North Korean panel of experts has been so successful in interdiction. These sanctions can take a big bite out of the Revolutionary Guard, out of the missile technology, and out of the illicit financing that builds the program.
But at the
That'll
end of the
change
day,
the way
also,
Tehran thinks in the next 3 months.
Sanctions in some way, too, are supposed to change the mind of the population, right? It's supposed to make them realize that perhaps the leadership of their own country isn't doing the best for them, that perhaps they should revolt. But doesn't it do the opposite? Do the people only get hurt here, and then it creates more of that anti-Western sentiment?
Yeah, there's a real problem here that this does allow the regime to say, look, we tried to make a deal, and the United States and its partners were not prepared to meet us halfway or to negotiate it with us at all. And also, you know, the problem here is that the Obama administration has made the nuclear issue the precondition to dealing with the range of other issues that we have, that we need to deal with.
Let's say that if Iran's program was proven to be only for peaceful purposes, their nuclear enrichment program, then does that mean that we're friends with them again? Does that mean that there are no other issues between the two countries?
No, it means you've got to take steps to find a way to prove that or not. And Iran's been unwilling to take those kinds of steps.
Let's say that it is proven. I'm saying hypothetically, and that's proven. Are we best friends?
No, but you're in a position to have a grand summit where the nuclear issue isn't the key stumbling block. So if you want that grand summit and you want that grand deal between the U.S. and Iran or the West and Iran, then the stumbling block needs to be dealt with.
And then the stumbling block is who? Israel?
No. It's the nuclear program.
There's an opportunity here to press Iran on the human rights abuses and to talk about the human rights abuses. You know, the United States is on the UN Commission for Human Rights and hasn't actually worked to get a resolution or to really press Iran on this issue. And, you know, when everything is wrapped up in the nuclear issue and you're only going for sanctions that set back diplomacy, you're not only setting back diplomacy on the nuclear issue, you're setting back any kind of resolution on human rights and all these other things that we want to deal with.
Well, the U.S. doesn't necessarily have the best track record when it comes to calling out people on their human rights abuses because, let's face it, they often do it only when it suits their interests. But I think, you know, we'll see where this goes from here because these sanctions are passed. Iran is tough on their stance. They said all negotiations are off. And I just don't know what comes next. Thank you both for being